Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Media. Today on the show, it is the long-awaited 76ers podcast. I've bothered Derek Bodner enough. I wanted to get some new blood in here, so I got one of my favorite people on the goddamn internet, Mike Levin from over at the Rights to Ricky Sanchez Podcast. Does a billion things on the internet, writes for Trial and Error on NBC, which just got picked up. Congratulations about that, Mike. And does a little bit of work still at Liberty Ballers. So how's it going, Mike?
It's good, man. 1 week to the draft. Feeling excited. It's that time of year.
So are you in full, I listen to the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, not every day that it comes out, but I listen to it probably twice a month or so. Are you guys in full YouTube big board mode, or are you watching games? What is your process here for prepping?
Well, Spike really has his process, which is right after the lottery, he watches YouTubes of the top prospects. I take it a little. I don't want to say I take it more seriously, because I think that is an unnecessary slight to Spike's process. I would say I pay attention all year round more often and dig in a little bit. But he takes his YouTubing very seriously, and I don't want to knock that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you actually watch college basketball sometimes. You'll occasionally tweet about it.
Yeah. That's the charm, I think, of the podcast is Spike finds his role in the draft prep, and he does it well.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into this and reset the scene for people who might not be 76ers fans. The Sixers went 28-54 last season. Offensive rating was dead last in the NBA. Defensive rating ended up 17th in the NBA, but we can kind of talk about how I think that's a bit of a misnomer, and they're better defensively than what that number indicates. Kind of a year of a lot of different years kind of mixed into one, I guess, because there was the 31-game stretch of Joel Embiid. There was the post-Nerlens Noel trade 76ers. What are your general feelings about where Philly is headed right now after the 2016-17 season?
It was a weird year.
Yeah, it was.
For sure. It does definitely feel like 3 seasons wrapped into one. I feel generally pretty great about him. It's just there's just so many. We have just so many options between, and then already building around the two, presumably star players that we have with Embiid and Simmons. Mm-hmm. As much as I don't truly trust Brian Colangelo at all, I feel like it's a very hard situation to fuck up. At least, I mean, obviously once you get towards closer to the top, but it starts to narrow your margin of error. But
see, but that was the whole thing with Sam Hinkie, though. He wanted to create so many options that it was impossible to fuck up. And I think this is going to be the perfect test of that, because now we have Brian Colangelo there, and we're going to find out.
I don't know that he would be right or wrong because he's not here, but he certainly set them up in an incredible way for the future. Because not only do we have our pick this year, which we got via pick swap with the Kings from the Nick Stauskas trade, we also have unprotected Lakers pick next year in addition to our first round pick, and then in 2019 unprotected Kings pick in addition to our first round pick. So we are just loaded up. I think there's an opportunity to jump up to 1 if they want, maybe some Jimmy Butler, Paul George stuff. Really, so many options. And that's, I was going to say something else. That's why, as much as they won 28 games last year, and that felt like a lot, to be honest. Felt like plenty. I was thinking about it yesterday. Really, the Sixers are in, maybe along with the Wolves or the Bucks, the best position of any team that's not the Warriors. Obviously, I don't think they're going to be the third best team in the league next year, but I think in terms of timeline for potential competing, I feel really good about how our core is building versus how long Golden State and Cleveland will be, very clearly ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I would throw Boston into that mix as well. I would probably rather be in Boston's scenario than Philly's scenario right now. But
maybe if they get cute with the number 1 pick, then it could go south pretty quick.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I think they're probably just going to take Markelle Fultz. As long as they take Fultz, they're probably fine. But having said that, the Sixers, one of the 5 best situations for the future and probably the NBA. And a lot of that revolves around Joel Embiid being just everything that anyone could have expected of him last year. He was basically the most per-minute effective defensive player through stretches of his run, as well as a 20-point per game, 8 rebound, 3 assists per game guy. That is almost impossible to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable how good he is on both ends of the court already. He's just scratching the surface.
And he's 23.
He's 23, but in basketball years, he's 7. He started playing late in his teens. And then he missed 2 years. Saying the sky is the limit is offensive to the sky. It's insane how good he is and how good he can become. Obviously, the big question mark is his health, but they're taking precautions with it, except for that one game against Houston that they made him come back for and then sat him for the rest of the year. The Sixers medical staff is a big question mark. So there's issues. It's not all roses, but in general, it's taking a step back. You got to feel really good about the way things are headed.
So yeah, you kind of alluded to the front office here, right? Being a pretty significant question mark. How much just trust do you have in what the front office says right now? Because I feel like my trust in what comes out of their mouth is very little, and then plus all of the medical stuff this year, there are a lot of kind of reasons I feel to really distrust a lot of what Philadelphia says and versus what they do.
Oh yeah, don't trust anything that they say. Not a single thing. I pretty much, when Simmons went down in practice before the season, I pretty much was he's done for the season. There's no way that they're going to play him at all.
Yeah.
People, the projection was that he'd come back in December or January at that point. But it was just we've just been here before so many times.
Yeah. And
I just know how things go. People don't make quick, healthy recoveries in Philadelphia. So it was just they're just going to wait it out and let them start fresh next year. And that's what happened. And then everybody started just tearing their meniscus. Covington, Okafor, everybody. Jahlil Okafor's knee has been hurt for 15 months. It's just, I don't trust anything that the medical staff or Colangelo says. I trust what Brett Brown says. He's a very thoughtful and pretty upfront guy. But in regards to health and planning and smoke screens, it's all. I mean, it's that time of year for everybody, but it's always that time of year for the Sixers.
Yeah, which is super weird because everyone talked about this veil of secrecy that Sam Hinkie had under the organization, and it's gotten way worse under Colangelo. No one has any idea what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just because he loves to talk. Colangelo just really loves to hear himself talk, and so he goes on every kind of show and just talks, but doesn't say anything. And when he does say something, he's lying. Derek Bodner, I forget the specifics now, but the only reason that Colangelo talked about a meniscus thing was because Bodner broke the story, and a minute later, Colangelo was yeah, it's a meniscus. We were going to announce it anyway, and it's come on, man, what are we doing?
You were not going to announce it.
No, he's not. It's all. I think, most people listening to this probably know that I'm Process Nation till I die. But it just holds up the critiques of Sam Hinkie, one of which was the theoretical losing and incessant, endless losing. But the other was a lot of, he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. It just throws that straw man out because it's this guy's not better. They should have never fired Hinkie. We don't need to talk about that. We don't need to dig in, but let me just drop that bomb that they should have never fired Hinkie because everybody's wrong. Everybody's wrong.
Well, I feel you were particularly upset about this kind of transition whenever the Nerlens Noel trade went down, right? You were steadfastly against the Nerlens Noel trade, remember, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bad trade. He's going to get paid a lot. Here's what happened. So they start the season. Colangelo is publicly being well, Jahlil or Nerlens, we'll see what happens with. He just already being like, we're going to trade him. One of them's going to trade, losing all leverage. No one wants either of them. They're like, oh, well, you clearly don't want them. We're not going to give you anything of value.
See, let me just say, that's where he fucked up, I think. The fact that
he kept doing it.
The fact that he kept pitting them against each other, and to the fan base made it a situation where they were going to pick one or the other. And, just from an asset management standpoint, it always made a little bit more sense to keep Jahlil Okafor than Nerlens Noel and paying Nerlens Noel like exorbitant amounts of money.
Well, contractually, sure.
Yeah.
But
Nerlens
in terms of what's best for the team, Nerlens clearly. Colangelo just didn't like Nerlens. If you remember, like Nerlens' season last year was weird too because he was like there was issues off the court and about him, it bubbling to a head about people always saying he's late and that kind of stuff. And then he didn't play for
elective surgery too.
Yeah, he had elective surgery. He didn't play for the first half-ish of the year. It seemed like he was never going to play. And then he came in and got like a huge standing ovation in his first game. And then he played great, and things were going well, and he was saying all the right stuff. And he's clearly a better player than Okafor. So things were heading in the right direction. And then days before the trade deadline, they make the Ersan Ilyasova trade, which was great. Everybody was excited about it. And then just a last-minute nothing trade to the Mavericks for Justin Anderson, who I like. I think, long and tough and could become a 3-and-D kind of guy. He's not there yet, but still worth a shot. And then they announced it as a first-round pick. And it was just bald lying to your fan base and just like thinking that your fan base is so fucking stupid. Like it was a top 18 protected pick. And the Mavs were like had to like win out pretty much to make that pick convey, and so it became 2 second-rounders. And so it's like, come on, man, come on to all of this. He never wanted Nerlens. If you go into that trade saying, hey, Nerlens is going to walk at the end of this year, we don't want him. Let's get literally anything for him. Then a pretty high second-rounder and a future second-rounder and taking a flyer on Justin Anderson, sure. I guess that's okay. But why do you have to operate under the assumption that you don't want to try to sign Nerlens when he's a great backup for Embiid, who has not shown any like long-term health? So you're going to need a good backup for Embiid. And Okafor's certainly not that guy because he can't defend shit. So it was a shitty trade. It's still a shitty trade. As Nerlens continues to succeed, we will never let anyone forget about it. But I not that I forgive it more, but it's just like, hey, you never wanted him. You came into the situation saying we're trading him. He's not coming back here. So that under the guise of we have to get something. Then that was at least like whatever. They're dumb. They're dumb, but they still can't.
That's my problem. Everything about this has been dumb, right? Like every single way they've handled this Nerlens Noel situation was dumb. They pitted him against Jahlil Okafor from the start in a battle that I don't think he was ever likely to win. They end up selling this as a first-round pick whenever, like you said, Dallas is essentially going to have to win out for this to be a first-round pick conveyed. If you just say, hey, we got a former first-round pick who was drafted in 2015 and 2 second-round picks, one of which will be a top 40 pick. I think that the fan base probably isn't super happy, but there isn't like a full-on revolt against your front office. Like this
just the lying felt
so dumb.
Yeah, like I mean, like there's no reason to say a top 18 protected pick when there's zero chance of that happening, unless you're like we're going to try to trick our fan base, or they're just dumb and Dallas like pulled one over on them. And they didn't realize that that's not going to happen.
Well, like, either of those situations is bad, yeah. Like, there's nothing good about that. Justin Anderson, I like. Like, I actually think this was a reasonably good trade for the 76ers, given the fact that I don't think they were ever going to pay Nerlens Noel. And to be honest, like, if I was them, I also would not pay Nerlens Noel. And I know that, as you mentioned, he's really good at basketball. Like, he is going to be a good defensive basketball player. I have not seen a ton of growth from him offensively over the course of his 3.5 years in Philly. Obviously he missed a lot of time here and there. The injury concerns worry me in terms of paying him 4 years, what will likely be $100 million. And, the off-the-court stuff is very real if you talk to people around the NBA. Like, all of those factors scare me in terms of paying him. And I would rather take a chance on Jahlil Okafor becoming compeant and Rashawn Holmes being, like, a useful backup player. Like, I'm fine.
Well, that's the thing, is that because Rashawn, Rashawn's not Nerlens, and he probably will never be, but Rashawn growing into a decent backup player and being able to stretch the floor a little bit, and block shots. He doesn't have Nerlens' savantness on defense, but that does mitigate some of the damage. I agree that the contract would have been a lot to pay a backup center, but with Embiid, you just don't know if he's going to be healthy or not. So it's not. It would have been worth some of the investment if you can figure it out. I mean, it was poisoned from the beginning. Colangelo stepped in. But yeah, you can forget about Jahlil Okafor becoming a competent anything. So that's out the window.
Okay, let me give my Jahlil Okafor pitch. As you said, he's been hurt essentially for like 15 months now, right? Like, we have no idea what's going on with Okafor's knees. What if he actually like somehow gets rest and recovery this summer and is like somewhat useful, like at that stage athletically? Then I think he can actually be a pretty good backup center, and at $11 million a year for the next 2 years, that's fine.
I mean, what if TJ McConnell grows 9 inches this offseason?
But I feel like growing 9 inches and getting healthier, like, very
well, no, it's
different.
It's not getting healthier. It's being able to do anything on defense, and he's never shown at any level a willingness to give a shit about defense or rebound. That's the other thing. It's not just defense; it's also rebounding. So if you're going to be bad, if you can't shoot, if you can't stretch the floor or play defense or rebound, you just don't have a place in the NBA this year or this. So like, get out. Yeah. I just want him out so bad.
The rebounding thing is the thing that like everyone missed on, including myself. Like, I just kind of assumed that a guy that understood how to carve out space and had a 7'5" wingspan and like huge soft hands was going to figure out how to rebound.
You would think.
That has not happened. That does not seem like it will happen, and that's a little bit scary.
You watch like Sean Long, who just like played some spot minutes last year when the Sixers were just devastated, and it's like, oh, that's how you rebound. That's how you rebound when you're that guy. And Jahlil just never shows an ability to give a shit, and so I just don't think it's going to happen. I would love to add him as a sweetener, any sweetener to anybody, at like any time. Sweetener. Please, someone sweeten something, for God's sakes.
Jahlil Okafor and number 39 for number 30. I would imagine you're in.
I'd be great. That'd be awesome.
Because like Utah could probably use a backup center. Maybe they take a shot on Okafor.
Do it.
Yeah.
Done.
Let's go on ahead and lock that in.
Lock it up.
Let's talk about number 3. I feel like that's probably the next most important piece. I guess Ben Simmons is, but we'll talk about Ben Simmons later on. Number 3 overall. Do you think that they're in as bad a spot as I kind of think they're in at number 3?
I wouldn't say bad. So I feel like you've talked about this online before. I generally think the consensus stuff is bullshit. You look back at any other prior draft and you're like, in that, it's tiers, right? Yeah. So in that, obviously, you almost always have your number 1 pick who's going to be a stud, right? And so I feel like that's Markelle Fultz. I think he's going to be an incredibly good NBA player. And then after that, I think from 2 through 8 or 9, you could really mix and match anywhere depending on fit and whatever.
Yep.
So while fit-wise, the consensus people, if you assume Lonzo at 2, the consensus guys at 3 aren't, necessarily perfect for the Sixers, whether it's Josh Jackson, De'Aaron Fox, or Jason Tatum. I don't think that if they drafted John Isaac or Malik Monk or Dennis Smith, then at 3, or even, you could trade back. But even if they draft him at 3, I don't think in 5 years, if those guys are good, no one's going to give a shit that, like, oh, Josh Jackson was actually ranked higher. You look at, like, the Nerlens draft, and a lot of shit went wild there, and people look back and like, okay, McLemore went there, and Alex Len went there, whatever. So,
well, look at the Okafor draft. We just talked about Jahlil Okafor probably never developing into like a starting level center and maybe being a competent backup at some point. Everyone thought he was going to go number 2 in that draft. He ends up falling to the Sixers at number 3, and they just take him because they think he's the best available talent on the board at that stage. And instead, it ends up being that they probably should have just taken Kristaps Porzingis, which is, I think kind of bullshit hindsight bias. Like, nobody thought that the Sixers were going to take Kristaps Porzingis. He didn't go in for a workout, wasn't even willing to meet with them.
Yeah.
But, like, at the same time, it kind of goes to show that as long as you're kind of drafting within a tier, I think you're okay.
Yeah. It's not saying, hey, go get, TJ Leaf right there. But I think you're in the tier of if you can't make a trade down work, or whether it's to Sacramento or Orlando or whatever, or New York, then just take the guy that you think is going to be good. Don't feel the need to just like play, everybody says this guy's better if you don't think it works. I just don't. I don't think I like Josh Jackson. My concerns with his jump shot grow every day. They sort of have gone in ways. For a while they were like, oh, maybe it's okay, but it's not. It's a broken jump shot, and I think putting him next to Simmons really does everybody a disservice.
De'Aaron Fox is the same concern.
No, right? I mean, you just can't. I mean, at least with Josh Jackson, he has had success shooting the three. It seems like fake success in a sample size situation because the free throws were really bad and the jumper looks bad. De'Aaron Fox just can't stretch the floor at all, and I just don't think you can. You just can't in good conscience pick him. He has to be just not on the board at all.
I actually think he's going to be okay at shooting someday. The shot is not broken, in terms of mechanics and everything. And I think as he gets a little bit stronger, he's probably going to be a 33 to 35% three-point shooter. But I'm not even sure that's enough for what Philly has on their roster currently. They want a guy who can knock down the shit out of shots, essentially. They need guys who can shoot the piss out of the ball. And that's something De'Aaron Fox is not going to do for sure. He's going to be a good point guard who I think will be able to at least competently shoot. He was around a 33% three-point shooter in high school. There's reason to believe that okay, he'll be able to shoot someday. Having said that, he's also not what the 76ers need, Yeah,
you just can't take that risk. We've had MCW, we did that dance. You just can't gamble on guys who have not shown an ability to hit shots consistently. So, I mean, I'd love a trade down. I would love 3 and Okafor for 5 and 10. Huh? How about that?
Well, here's one that I pitched. I guess maybe last week or maybe this week. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was number 3 for number 5 and Bogdan Bogdanovic, who is essentially one of the 5 best players in Europe now and is coming overseas this year. 6'6" wing, go out and get a guy that you can really use and who would fit reasonably well with Dario Saric.
I'd be fine with that. Throw in a pick swap for me, a future pick swap, and then I'll say yes to that. I need a pick swap in every trade at this point. I just need it's the only thing that keeps me alive. But yeah, I mean, this draft in general. To me, is I've said this before, but 2 through 9-ish is that second tier.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of those guys, but really they all have pretty glaring weaknesses or at least flaws that will keep them from being, all-star level players. So because the Sixers have all of the assets I mentioned earlier on, I would do whatever it took to go up and get one from Boston. If that means trading the Lakers pick or Kings pick or, Dario or whatever, I would do it. Because if you can add Markelle Fultz to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, I think that is just a decade of dominant basketball in Philly.
Well, here's the question. Would you trade Ben Simmons for the number 1 overall pick this year?
Ben Simmons and 3? Or
Ben Simmons and one of the future picks?
No. I think Simmons and Fultz are about on the same level. Yeah. People say
I would say Fultz is slightly better, but they're probably in the same tier.
That's where I live. I think people like Andrew Sharp, if you've heard of him, my former roommate. If he's talked a lot about how Simmons really puts you in a bind in terms of who you can put next to him and the kind of players you can put around him. I think it also works for you a lot in a bunch of other ways. So, you don't worry as much about Malik Monk or Frank Ntilikina or Dennis Smith's creating or decision-making abilities if you have Simmons there handling a lot of it. So if you had just a regular power forward, then you'd expect a lot from those guys. And now it's like, hey, we got this guy, and you just need a guy. The thing is, instead of creation is not quite as important as shooting has become.
Yeah. So Ben Simmons is a tough one for me because I think that their plan to use him as a point guard is just like a disaster waiting to happen.
Really?
I think he's going to be able to like handle in transition, and I think he's going to be able to like lead the break. But once he gets into the half court, I think it's just going to like not go well at all. Where he's a really good passer, like in the low post and like at the mid post and elbow areas. He's not like a guy that, you know, you want to have at the top of the key whenever like the defense is set and he's trying to like break into the teeth of the defense, you know?
Yeah, I see that. I mean, he certainly didn't do it at LSU. I mean, there was a lot of handling, bringing the ball up the court and like making the first read and stuff, but not a ton of. He didn't run a ton of pick and roll. They didn't have anybody to like roll with them at all. But I mean, a Simmons Embiid pick and roll sounds great.
It sounds super cool in theory.
Yeah, Simmons's jumper is obviously a huge question and everything, but
they're just going to ice him every time. But it sounds super cool in theory.
Yeah, but yeah, I think the problem is he's such a good passer that even if you back off him and you have guys cutting off ball, then he can find somebody if you give him space. So the jumper obviously has always been the question and will continue to be until he hits shots at a consistent level or even takes shots consistently. But I'm not. I wouldn't rush to move up to one to trade Simmons, but. I would do almost whatever other things, other Embiid and Simmons-less things to get to number one to get Fultz. Because once you have those three guys, the rest kind of doesn't matter. You build around them. Yeah. Afterwards,
like what I would say is, I think that Ben Simmons should basically always play with a point guard. Like you can play him at point occasionally and run the other point guard off ball, but I think that you should always have him with a guy who is a really good ball handler and can get teams like in and out of their sets in the half court.
So you would say that's not Malik Monk to you, or at least that's not currently Malik Monk.
That's not Malik Monk to me. Having said that, like if the Sixers went out and signed like George Hill this summer and then paired him with Malik Monk, like that's kind of the perfect scenario, right? Like if that would happen, I might pick the Sixers to make the playoffs next year. Like,
oh, you should do that regardless. It's happening.
Like I would love that. Like I think that would be really, really fun.
The Bulls made the playoffs this year.
Come on. Yeah, like
if Embiid's healthy, they make the playoffs 100% guaranteed. Yeah. They were a good team, not even just like a Sixers good team. They were a good team when Embiid was playing last year in January.
They were legitimately the number one defense in the NBA last year when Embiid was on the floor.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously minutes restrictions, obviously injuries, obviously wasn't playing back-to-backs. Right. They're taking his time on getting healthy and rehabbing, but if he's healthy, they're in the playoffs. It's just not a question.
I think it's very plausible. I'm not quite sure I'm there yet, but I think it's very possible that they just flat out make the playoffs.
What's going to happen is they're going to make the playoffs. If Embiid's healthy. If he's not healthy, then we're fucked. But if they're going to make the playoffs, and people are going to be like, "Who saw this coming? What a wild the Sixers with the turnaround of the century!" And it's going to be like, we've said this the whole time. This is what we've said. This is always what we've said. And I'm just going to continue to be mad about everything, even as they have success. I will always be mad at the slights. The slights get you down.
So yeah, like I'm in on Ben Simmons relatively. I just think that they're going to want to play him with a point guard. Malik Monk, I think, would probably be my pick if I stayed at number 3 if I was the Sixers.
Okay.
I don't feel great about it, but like at the same time, I feel strongly that with Ben Simmons on the floor in the half court and with Joel Embiid just being the monster in the post up that he is and on the block that he is, you're going to want as much floor spacing as possible. Malik Monk is at least going to provide that as like kind of an off-ball point guard. Like I don't want him running sets in the half court. Like I want him running off the ball. I want him, running off of pin down screens and running off of baseline screens. But like at the same time, if you needed him to play point, he's also 19 years old, and like I'm not gonna like say that he can never develop into a point guard either. You know?
Right. I mean, we've been talking on the Ricky about about him, like about like the Kentucky syndrome of like guys who were pigeonholed into this thing for Calipari and then like could break out and show an ability to do other stuff. It didn't seem like that was the case with Monk. It seemed like maybe we're stretching a little bit, but Jonathan Sharks wrote a piece yesterday about like his hidden skills or whatever, and made some good points about how he just didn't get the opportunity to run pick and roll that much, and even when he did, they didn't have shooters around him at all.
Yeah.
It was just Derek Willis and like nobody else that could shoot. So the teams would just bog down the paint and leave him with like no options. So it's a possibility that there's untapped potential. Certainly he could grow into being a smarter guy with the ball and a primary initiator, at least secondary next to Ben Simmons. But
like the low end outcome of this is like he turns into Zach LaVine, right? Like he can't play point and he just turns into this awesome like scorer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think people talk about him as Lou Williams, but like Lou Williams had some pretty big assist seasons, or at least stretches for the Sixers.
Yeah,
back in the day. So I don't know. He's really not the kind of player I like, just like archetypally. That's not a word, but
it works.
It feels like there is untapped potential. The athleticism which he shows in transition. And he doesn't really show in the half court. I'd be interested to see if they can bring some out of that. Certainly, he'd be a good fit. I think Lonzo also on paper would be a good fit.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So, like, before we get to Lonzo, who would be your pick at number 3 right now?
I would take Dennis Smith.
So why would you take Dennis Smith? And then
I think the ability to score on 3 levels, run the pick and roll, shoot off the dribble. Another guy that had no talent playing with him at NC State. Coming a year off of an ACL injury, and he was still one of the most athletic players in the country. So I think there's more athleticism to come out of that. I think that
he's probably the best athlete in the draft.
Yeah, and then the Sixers don't really have a ton of athleticism. Simmons is obviously athletic for being like a point forward,
right?
But in terms of like just getting up and filling a lane in transition and just throwing something down.
Justin Anderson's probably the next best.
Kind of. Luwawu is kind of like silky athletic, more than like bouncy. They need a guy that just like has bounce, and so that's why I am at least like Dennis Smith, Malik Monk, Josh Jackson does appeal to me because I would like that guy just to come in and fill the lane for Simmons. But yeah, Smith has that primary like secondary initiator ability. You can run him in the pick and roll. There's concerns about his defense, but like any point guard on a shitty team, like Markelle Fultz wasn't playing a ton of defense on Washington either. He was blocking shots in like transition, but really not like playing off ball defense very well either. So I think Dennis Smith is a guy that just has a ton of potential. He could be Steve Francis. That you could see that as a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing. You get Steve Francis at number 3. That's great. Like Houston is not complaining about getting Steve Francis at number 3.
Yeah, so I really like him. I think that there's a lot more playing with teammates who can move and allowing him to not be the benefit of Simmons is he doesn't have the point guard wouldn't be burdened with doing everything. I think you're right that having Simmons run point like every day, 35 minutes a game, starting in the offense every time might be a little bit much. I just maybe it's gonna be great. He's sat for a year, maybe he's learned and Brett Brown's working with him, but I think it'd be nice for both guys to have people that can initiate when they're coming off the ball or posting up or whatever it is. So I feel like it's a good fit. For whatever reason, the consensus is him is lower. I think he's right in that second tier after Fultz. I would happily trade down to get him, or I'd be really just fine with taking him at 3.
Yeah, he has as high a ceiling as anyone like in this draft outside of Fultz. Like that dude is just a freak athlete. Already polished in the pick and roll, can score at all 3 levels. Like you said, like he is a really ridiculous player. He racked up like 15 assists games with like 0 talent around him at NC State. Like it was 0 talent's probably a misnomer. Like there were actually probably like 6 or 7 like professional level like Europe players on that.
Yeah, but the coach got fired halfway through the season, and it's as bad as Fultz's team was in Washington. So I don't think that. Fultz gets a pass, and he's a better put it together more. Certainly, I like Fultz more than Smith, but Smith doesn't get the pass that Fultz gets for whatever reason, and he was coming off a year of ACL injury.
I like Smith. Really, really good, really high ceiling player. I have him at number 6 on my board. I think that would be fine for the Sixers to take him. Like, if I was trying to create like a Sixers specific board, I would probably go Fultz, Ball, Monk, Smith. If you made me guess, the reason that I'm a little bit lower on Smith is because I think the jump shot is a little bit scary still. Like, I'm not 100% sure that he is like a super good jump shooter or like will be a super good jump shooter.
That's not his forte for sure. But I mean, you look at all the stuff he had. He took everything he got jump shot wise was what he created himself. Yep. It was him off the dribble. It was him pulling up in the mid range. It was him taking tough shots. And that could be a shot selection thing for sure. I'm not writing that off as like, oh, he takes great shots. But when you have no teammates to pass to, and your coach is not employed anymore, you kind of just get what you can. So I think there's a lot more to unlock with him.
Well, Dennis Smith shooting the ball was their most efficient offense last year.
Yeah.
One thing I will note there, he was 0.69 points per possession on jump shots off the dribble last season. 35 effective field goal percentage. That's a little bit scary to me. But,
sure.
You know, having said that, part of the thing that I talk about is being able to shoot off the catch whenever, like, defenses just have to, like, collapse out to you and close out to you whenever Joel Embiid is in the post or Ben Simmons is at the, like, elbow or at the high post. He was at, like, a 1.1 points per possession on catch and shoot stuff. So much better there. He at least provides a threat off the catch, has good mechanics off the catch to, make this at least tenable. Let's talk about Lonzo Ball real quick. Where would you kind of have Lonzo in the grand scheme of Sixers draft boardiness?
So I have him at 8 on mine. I can acknowledge that he's a good fit, the kind of player he is. I like kind of what we talked about with Simmons, another guy that can work the offense, pass the ball around, hit shots off the catch. But the defense concerns me. The lack of being able to run a pick and roll or penetrate, get to the basket, shoot off the dribble. I think that the shot is unlikely to convey well. He needs a lot of space to get his shot off. I like him in transition. I like him rebounding, grab and go. Him and Simmons playing with each other would be a lot of fun for sure. But I just think the things he's good at are, passing, transition, and I like his ability as an off-ball cutter also. I think really, he was a mid-first round pick coming into the year, and then he played on a UCLA team that was just perfect for him. It was pace, and it was like a ton of shooters. Yeah. And that benefited him, and he was perfect for that system. But I think people overrate how much he, as a player, rather than as a positional need, made that team better. I think again that he would come into Philly and be solid, just because of how he can hit shots off the catch if the funky form translates, and he can pass the ball around, and the team would be weaponized in transition the way Brett Brown wants them to be. But I just don't think he's going to be an all-star level player. I think he's going to be a fine point guard.
So I think that's definitely the downside for me. I am not convinced for sure that he is some all-star level point guard. I have him at number 4 on my board. I am, very close in terms of him versus Dennis Smith versus De'Aaron Fox. I think there are a lot of strengths and weaknesses to each of those guys. What I will say about his fit with Philadelphia is that if they would have both he and Ben Simmons on that roster, they would have basically the best transition attack in the NBA within 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a lot of fun for sure. I'm not gonna acknowledge that. I just think he's not it's tough because he really would be a fun add to the team. I just don't. I look at him and say okay, legitimately, what is he good at? And to me, it's not much outside of the flashy stuff that you know. Mm-hmm. He certainly's got a high basketball IQ, but just the way he plays, he's not super fast with the ball in his hands in the half court. He can't shoot off the dribble. I think you have to surround him with a ton of shooters and just let him play like pace and space, which is good. That's kind of what we want to do. But I just think in a vacuum, he is not a player I like, despite the fact that the fit would be nice. So I have him behind guys I really like guys who can defend at the point of attack. I know it's not the most important position defensively, but I think it sets the tone in a nice way. Avery Bradley is a guy that I've always been attracted to. So I have Donovan Mitchell higher. I have Frank Ntilikina higher. I think 3-and-D-esque point guards, because I don't love Lonzo's jumper, even though Donovan Mitchell's jumper is a bit of a question mark and Frank Ntilikina's jumper is still a bit of a question mark. I think that Lonzo's isn't perfect, so I'd rather get guys that can actually defend at the point of attack. And then Monk, just as a shooter, is above him also as a shooter and also in transition.
Yeah, I think the jump shot's going to be fine for Lonzo going to his left. From having talked to shooting experts and NBA scouts and stuff like that, they actually believe that going to his left, that right to left crossover step back that he takes, he's not going to need any space to get that off. They think he's just going to be fine, and being that left eye dominant shooter that brings it up on the left side of his body, it's actually going to be a little bit easier for him to get that shot off. But
don't you think they're going to take that away from him?
That's what I'm saying.
If they know that he can't go right?
Yeah, NBA defenses are so sophisticated that I think they're going to play him to the right the entire way. Imagine what Tony Allen's going to do to him, right?
Yeah.
Tony Allen is just going to shade him, get up in his grill, and just force all sort of problems. Avery Bradley, same thing. They play Avery Bradley 4 times a year. Avery Bradley is just going to get up in his grill, going to force him right. He'll try and step back to the left, but it's going to be tricky. I think that he is probably going to be a 38 to 42% 3-point shooter, but
that seems high.
Well, I think that when he gets the space to get the shot, it's going to go. But I think that he's going to take less of those shots from the 23 to 25 foot range where you're actually an effective 3-point shooter than what most people will. He'll take those deep 30-foot threes and might maybe make a few of them. But in terms of shots that are coming near the NBA 3-point line that are actually, shown to be effective shots, I don't know that he's going to get a ton of those off just because of the jump shot.
Yeah.
Which is scary. Yeah. That's a little bit scary.
Yeah, and I truthfully don't want to deal with the dad. I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about him. And nothing about it. I don't think he's a bad kid. I don't.
He's awesome.
That's not what I read into it. I just don't want to deal with the dad. We've had too many bad parents in Philadelphia. Jaleel Okafor's dad, KJ McDaniels' mom. I mean, plenty of good ones. Donovan McNabb's mom and Allen Iverson's mom were great. But I'm just good. I'm just good on. I mean, Kendall Marshall's dad. We don't need it. We're good. We're set. Please don't make us do it.
Let's talk about the Philly second round picks here. They have 36, 39, 46, and 50. Anyone interest you? Throw out some names that are going to be there in the second round because I know you know.
Oh, these are my guys. I love these guys. I would absolutely. The Sixers have. There's no way the Sixers make all 4 of these picks, right? There's just not room for them to be on the team. There's not a ton of international guys that we're excited about.
Yeah, you can find some to stash if you want, but
it would be stashing for just the purpose of stashing. I mean, I guess you do it. I mean, I'm sure hopefully one of them at least is a stash. But I'm sure
one of them will be a stash. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would like to pair one of them to move, pair 2 of them to move up to the high 20s or whatever, or the low 20s. Move up and get a guy like Derek White or Josh Hart. I really like Frank Jackson a lot. I think he's a guy that people are sleeping on. Super young, super athletic, can shoot. Was sort of forced into a weird thing at Duke. I think he's going to be a legitimate NBA point guard, and would be a good fit next to Simmons also. And then I would just take a couple shots at 3-and-D guys like LJ Peak or Davon Reed. Dylan Brooks is a guy that probably won't defend at an NBA level, but can really get to the basket, and the Sixers don't have a ton of those guys.
Good decision maker too.
Yeah, I like Sindarius Thornwell. Tyler Dorsey is a guy that I like also. I don't think that there's a ton legitimately a ton different between his game and Malik Monk's right now. Obviously, Monk is more athletic, but that only shows up in transition. So at this point, Tyler Dorsey is not that poor man's of a Malik Monk, and I think could be a better defender.
Tyler Dorsey, the funny thing about Dorsey is, so we talked earlier about Kentucky playing in no space whatsoever whenever Malik Monk had the ball. I mean, Tyler Dorsey had all of the space in the world because Dana Altman is one of the 5 best offensive coaches in college basketball. He was just playing in an ocean of space, and it really helped him. Not to say he's not good. He is a really good player, I think. And, everyone has Frank Jackson higher on their board than Tyler Dorsey. They're pretty close in age, and Tyler Dorsey is just way better than Frank Jackson right now.
Yeah, I think there's more to untap with Jackson because of the athleticism. But well, we'll see. Sterling Brown, I like a lot. Just 3-and-D guys. Just find some role players. I mean, we have Covington, who is great, and Luwawu seems to be great, and they have Furkan Korkmaz, who probably won't come over until next year. Justin Anderson's another guy. So we have some of those guys, but it just never hurts to have more guys that can play both ways and hit threes. Because we're really not. We really just need more athletic guys who can defend. That's defend and shoot. That's it. Because we lost. We used to be that very athletic, bouncy team, and we sort of lost a little bit of that. Jeremy Grant's gone, KJ McDaniels is gone, Tony Roten has been gone for a while. But so it'd be nice to have a guy that can just sort of jump out of the gym and hit shots and defend. I want to like Dev Robinson. I like Dev Robinson a lot. As I think he wears his shorts great. I think I'm a big fan of that. But I have a tough time trusting guys who are 22 and a half and are still raw.
Yep.
Terrence Ferguson is another guy. Those kinds of guys I like. I mean, DJ Wilson might be interesting. Jordan Bell, I think it would be cool as just a throw him on the bench and just let him be a dog coming in off the bench.
He would be awesome with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. He would be awesome with those guys because you just throw him out on the floor with those guys and run wild. Just say run wild. Just defend everyone all over the floor, block weak side shots, and do everything.
Exactly.
He would be the ultimate Brett Brown player. Brett Brown would fall in love with him.
Totally. So I like this guy. I think I have Juwan Evans at 12 on my Sixers board.
I have him at 14. I love Juwan Evans.
Yeah. So I think I would do, if you can get up to, say you take a John Isaac, or even Josh Jackson at 3, then and you still need a point guard later on in the draft, or if you think the odds are they're going to throw big money at Kyle Lowry and see what happens. So if you want to get up into the late first and grab one of those point guards, whether it's Derek White or Juwan Evans, then I would definitely do that also.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I think there's even a relative chance now that Juwan Evans gets to number 36, which is the dumbest thing in the world to me. Yeah, but
I think he's really good.
Yeah, also,
I think he's going to be a legitimate NBA point guard.
Oh yeah, I think he's probably going to start multiple years in the NBA. Wing for me, you kind of mentioned, is their big weakness, right? They just need wings that can defend and that can shoot. Tim Luwawu obviously is kind of interesting. He kind of came on during the fake basketball portion of the late season. Mm-hmm. Justin Anderson, I've talked about already. I'm a fan. I think eventually he can probably shoot a little bit. If that's the case, then he's going to be a really good two-way player, just given the strength and athleticism. I know that the defense hasn't totally shown up yet, but I think it will. He's smart enough to kind of figure it out. Stauskas, obviously not a two-way player, but has shown that he is a useful player nonetheless. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that he's turned that around. Do you think Gerald Henderson will be back next year? I see no reason not to bring him back, I guess.
Yeah, I think it'll depend. There's really not a ton of roster spots. I know it's weird because they won 28 games last year, but there's not a ton. And I think it'll be hey, if we don't end up getting that free agent that we want, or we don't attract, I think it'll be hey, he's a good locker room guy. He can get a bucket a little bit. He is theoretically a two-way player also as he gets older. I see no reason why they would rush to trade him, but if they had to, I think they'd be fine with it. Also.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think ultimately, though, that's kind of why we're talking about, Josh Jackson here, right? They need wings, and if you believe Josh Jackson can be a shot maker, then sure, why not? But,
I don't. That's the thing. It's I think there's a lot of talking yourself into stuff this time of year.
Yeah.
And I think, Bodner wrote about it, about, he was talking himself into Jahlil Okafor improving his defense and rebounding. And people seem like they're talking themselves into Josh Jackson becoming a serviceable jump shooter. And it's just tough to assume that, because so often it doesn't happen. More often than not, the player that they are coming out of college, they get better at certain things. Their IQ improves, their defensive awareness improves, sure. But if they can't do a thing, then they will likely never be able to do the thing. Mm-hmm. So it could happen, but I think we have to assume that it won't. So
and it keeps getting harder and harder with all of this too, right? Because all of these guys are so young, right?
Yeah.
Like the average age of lottery picks continues to get younger and younger. Like we've hit like a kind of low point, I guess, in terms of what it can be under the one and done rule. But it also has hit the point where I think that we often write off players a little bit too quickly, I think, given the fact that, like D'Angelo Russell's going to be like 21 next year, and Jahlil Okafor is going to be like, 21, 22 next year. Like, I just refuse to write those guys off, I guess. Like, D'Angelo Russell's obviously been really good, and Jahlil Okafor's been really bad. But, like, at the same time, it does feel like a certain number of people just often go, oh, yeah, like these guys aren't what we expected them to be at 19 and 20 years old, so they'll never get there. Like, Josh Jackson's jump shot is going to be like either what it is now, or it's going to be like a page one rewrite where we have no idea what it'll be. I don't know that I'm going to say one way or the other, I guess,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's
the default position seems the safest, but like,
I wrote about it for the big board at Liberty Ballers, and it's like, I mean, how do you know? Like, you talk to your shot people and say, hey, could he become good? And they're like, maybe, if it's about the reps, if it's about, tweaking one, if his elbow flares out or whatever it is. You look at Josh Jackson, you look at De'Aaron Fox, OG Anunoby, those kinds of guys where you're just like, I mean, maybe if he can shoot, then he's a really good NBA player. And if he can't, then you probably can't play him. He's Andre Roberson. So, it's a dicey, it's a weird, scouting is inexact, and I disagree with the idea of a crapshoot that generally just feels like it's random. But there is an element of like, well, I don't know if he's going to be able to shoot. Hopefully, you'd think that he's been playing basketball all his life, he'd be able to shoot better than like 19% from three. But it's a weird thing in game. There's a ton of, obviously we've seen the videos of people hitting shots in an empty gym. Seems generally easier.
Willie Cauley-Stein can still shoot threes.
Yeah. But anyway, and just to mention, you mentioned Sixers wings. Robert Covington is one of the best two-way wings in the NBA.
Right. No, I need to mention Robert Covington. He is awesome.
He hasn't shot as well as he should. I think it'll come back next season as spacing improves a little bit more with Simmons and Embiid on the court at the same time. And he's really he's become a legitimate wing lockdown defender.
He has like the most disruptive hands that I can remember.
Yeah, you can put him on point guards. You can put him on fours. He can really almost guard 1 through 5, depending on your 5. So that's a guy they just picked up his option for next year. Hopefully they sign him to a long-term extension before the season. That really helps. He's not crazy athletic, and he's not anywhere close to a creator on offense, but he's a really, really, really good defender, and that kind of came out of nowhere. It's been great to watch.
Yeah, like Robert Covington now is a like 13.6 rebound, 1+ steal, 1+ assist guy who also plays like all NBA level defense.
Yeah,
like those guys get now like $17 million a year.
Yeah. That's I mean, I feel good. It's like it's really hard to mess it up. If they can get down to 5 and 10, then that'd be awesome. Then you go like, Malik Monk and Donovan Mitchell, or John Isaac and Donovan Mitchell, and then that's just like an insane defensive lineup that can be out in transition, can hit catch and shoots. Embiid being like at least a league average 3-point shooter is insane. There's a lot. It's really hard to fuck up. It's really, really hard to fuck up.
The Sixers are in a spot where that is really just the best statement you can make. It's really hard to fuck up. They're in a great spot. Let's see how they fuck it up.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
All right, Mike, do you have anything that you want to plug, anything that you want to talk about before we get out of here?
Liberty Ballers, a lot of great draft stuff on there. A bunch of the guys that I brought on, and now I sit back and kick my feet up and watch them dominate. I was a writer on season 1 of Trial and Error. It's on NBC. You can watch it on NBC.com or the NBC app or on Hulu. It's very funny. We come back next year.
It really was hilarious. Like, I watched every episode. And, like, I can't remember the last, like, sitcom that was a new show that I watched every episode of. Like, it was hilarious, though. Like, it was just a really interesting concept.
Yeah, we'll take the numbers. So
we'll take the numbers. I love it.
We'll take the numbers. All good.
Yeah, we're all good here. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Thanks to Mike for coming on. Go read all of his work over at Liberty Ballers. Go watch his work over on NBC and watch Trial and Error. We'll be back at some point next week. I will have some more team-specific stuff, some more general stuff going into the NBA draft here. We're powered by CLNS Media. Hopefully you're enjoying the podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. Really helps us move up in the ratings. Really helps us get our numbers up, as Mike alluded to with his TV show. So thanks for listening, and until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.